Hello and welcome to the Choralosophy Podcast. This is episode 172, Dispelling Myths About Middle School with Ian Henning and Jacob Garcia. Over the years, this podcast has been a place for many types of conversations on a variety of topics, but one of the recurring passions of mine has been the reimagining and the reinstructing of the way we teach literacy. Drawing upon literature known as the science of reading, I started noticing that in music education, we have been woefully behind the times and behind the research. In the Choralosophy Music Literacy Suite, I have collected several resources from the show's catalog to attempt to address this. To find that suite, by the way, you can go to the show notes or you can go to choralosophy.com/music literacy, all one word. Since we started, I have heard from hundreds of colleagues that are revolutionizing their classroom environments. They are using the piano less or not at all, spending less time after school making practice tracks, and putting more responsibility on their students. While this is exciting, the a cappella rehearsal concept has not been without its detractors, especially from teachers of younger students. Sure, this may work with advanced kids, but not my sixth graders, they might say. Or that sounds like something that would work with a great privileged suburban high school, but not at my school. Or simply, my kids aren't ready for this. Maybe we'll try it when they're more advanced. These are all things that I've heard quite a bit. Ultimately, all of them are impulses that are off the mark. Music is a language, and a language acquisition is easier the younger we are. We should be starting the process of audiation and literacy tools as soon as possible. We don't have time to wait. For this episode, I spoke to two middle school choir teachers who have students in grades 6 through 8 who are having incredible growth and success in a short time from incorporating some choralosophy concepts, like not playing the notes for kids on the piano, and small group testing, individual literacy assessments for accountability, individual feedback, etc. Tune in as Ian Henning and Jacob Garcia describe passionately the ways that they have taken the ideas that they have heard here and adapted them and made them their own. We also get to hear the ways these things have revolutionized their classroom cultures and behaviors. The episode's a little longer than normal, and I think you will find it to be worth it as I incorporated the thoughts of two colleagues, so stay tuned. I'm excited to tell you about Ludus.com, a new platform designed for the performing arts by people from the arts. With Ludus, you'll have access to a friendly, knowledgeable customer success team that's available when you need them. And the best part, there are no setup costs, contracts, or hidden fees. It's 100% free to your program, so why not give it a try and see how Ludus can help you streamline your operations and put the focus back on your passion for the arts. Choralosophy listeners can go to ludus.com/choralosophy for an upgrade for free to their marketing suite. Did you know that listening to this show is like a golden ticket for discounts? You can get discounts when you sign up, you and your students, at sightreadingfactory.com, and you can plug that code in every year to keep that 10% discount going and support the show all at the same time. You can do the same thing at mymusicfolders.com every time you order the best choir folders on the market. You can do that at Graphite Publishing and EndeavorMusicPublishing.com when you order some of the best online printable sheet music in the industry. All of these websites will allow you to enter Choralosophy at checkout to get a discount. So make sure you do yourself and the show a favor by remembering to do that every time. If you are a Choralosophy listener who finds value in this content, in the resources, and just in the conversation, you might consider supporting at Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/choralosophy and sign up to support the underlying costs of this show. It is a huge deal for me when you do that, and it shows your thanks, but it also helps me continue to do this. The show is produced on Patreon by Venture Studios, Ryan Main, Michael Herron, Kyle Peterson, Stephen Kathy Kakachik, David Kowalczyk, Max Jackson, Ulrika Igrain Munoz Alarcon, John Warner, Angie Schilling, Nathan Hines, Jared Hendricks, Brian Long, and Jonah Clixbull. Okay, everybody, I am here with Ian Henning to talk about what life is like in his world. Specifically, I have a lot of curiosities for Ian with his middle school kids.
Hey, Chris. It's an honor to be here. I'm excited to share my perspective with your podcast listeners. I teach part-time at a K-12 charter school called Peak to Peak Charter School in Lafayette, Colorado. This is my fourth year teaching. It's my second year at this school. I'm really excited this year because it's my first ever second year at the same school, and I am just loving it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how your program is structured? So what your school day is like, how much you get to see the kids, that kind of stuff. Kind of some of the basics that might be helpful in this
Absolutely.
conversation.
Yes. So, Peak to Peak, like I said, is a K-12 public charter school. It is on the smaller side. We serve 1,450 students K through 12. Of those, 650 are in high school, and the other 800 are split between elementary and middle school. I teach, we're on the block system, so I teach 90-minute block classes, and I see them every other school day. We call them odd and even days. So I teach my choirs on odd days, and so I will see them either 2 or 3 times a week, assuming that there's no like school closures or weird scheduling, things like that. So sometimes it'll like there's like a really unfortunate week where I only see them once a week for 90 minutes, but then that's balanced out by all the times that I get to see them for 3 times a week at 90 minutes. That's quite a lot of instructional time. So I'm very lucky in that sense. So I teach 3 choirs. I have one grades 6 through 12 non-auditioned choir. In practice, that's pretty much all 6th graders. This year, I have 1 8th grader and 2 9th graders in that choir, but everybody else is in 6th grade. So it really is, I consider it like my beginning middle school chorus.
Right.
The second choir that I have is a grades 7 and 8 auditioned choir. And then the last choir that I have is a grades 9 through 12 auditioned choir.
Okay, everybody, I am here with Jacob Garcia, who teaches middle school choir in the Waco, Texas.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm a fairly new listener, actually. We got to meet each other at a professional development at the beginning of this school year, and ever since then, I've been working through some of your past episodes. And when you reached out to me to invite me on the podcast, I was very enthusiastic to join you. So I teach at a middle school, and that will encompass 6th, 7th, 8th grade. And I have my classes set up in a way that they're separated by voice types, but also by musicianship level, if you will. All of my 6th graders go to beginner choir, and we have a treble choir and a tenor bass choir, even though we know that they're all changing baritones, all that. But they like that title. Then, of course, I have a JV, a junior varsity treble choir, junior varsity tenor bass choir, which are 7th and 8th graders, generally who are still working on their musicianship or are new to choir, right, if they join in after the 6th grade. And then, of course, I have 2 varsity groups, a varsity treble group and a varsity tenor bass group. Again, 7th and 8th graders usually have taken with me before and have shown, a certain level of musicianship that I deem appropriate for the kind of music that we're going to do. I see them every day. I see them for 45 minutes a day. We have kind of the classic bell schedule.
Now we're going to jump back to the conversation with Ian Henning for about the next 15 minutes. He's going to be talking to us about the way he first tried to roll out some of these literacy concepts in his middle school classroom. So I want to read a little bit of a post that you made actually on the Choralosophy's Facebook page. I took a screenshot here, which was one of the things that inspired me to reach out to you for this conversation. So I want to read a little bit of it so that the audience can understand kind of where we're going here with this conversation. So you said, this was back on October 13th, today, once again, my 6th grade choir, my 7th and 8th grade choir, and my high school choir spent the majority of rehearsal time teaching themselves their music. And all 3 groups finished rehearsal with run-throughs that absolutely blew my expectations out of the water. And it just keeps happening. My philosophy has always been to cultivate independent musicianship, but it wasn't until I discovered choralosophy that I really started to figure out how to get them on the path to that goal. And of course, there's a little bit more if people can go back and read that. But that caught my eye. And the reason it caught my eye is because a lot of the things that that I've been sharing for years on this show with the kind of some of the ways that we teach literacy and have some of the ways we've been taught to teach literacy wrong has been something that I've known for years that these things work. However, it's not very frequent that I've seen it. That I've seen a teacher of middle school choir really like step up and say, "Hey, you know what? Actually, 6th graders can do this." And I would even say, in my experience, younger than 6th graders can do this kind of a thing. In fact, language acquisition is easier for the younger brain than it is for the older brain. And as we all know, music is a language. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how you came across the Choralosophy concepts, and then and give us some examples of how you've implemented them in your classroom, because now this is year two, and some of the things that you're doing so specifically day to day.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a fairly recent adoptee of the what I would call the Choralosophy method, as it were. This past January 2023, I went to the CMEA, Colorado Music Educators Association conference in Colorado Springs. It's my first time ever going. I've been to ILMEA over in Illinois as a college student many years, but things just being how they were at my past schools, I was never able to get funding to go to the conference as a working teacher. And I knew it was going to be super valuable to me. And so I always look really deeply into all of the sessions. And I noticed your sessions, which are now podcast episodes, the a cappella rehearsal and the follow-up session about why this methodology, why it's so crucial and why it's so beneficial to students. And those really inspired me. I spent the rest of that weekend just binging the Choralosophy episodes of notes, like episode 18, the classic one, but also another early episode about the gatekeeper versus the was it the arbiter? My memory's failing me
I've used a variety of terms over the years, but yeah, like not setting ourselves up as a high priest of the music is one I like. I like that image, because it's like with the priest, nobody gets to the Father, but without coming through the priest. And I don't think we should approach music that way. It sounds like with your description of your rehearsal recently, the sixth graders working independently, I'm, of course, assuming that they're working on music that's appropriate for their age level, and they're able to access that linguistically, that yes, you're guiding them in the classroom, but they're out figuring out the answers, so to speak, on their own, which I think is so important. So that's awesome. So tell us a little bit more about what they're doing. So class starts, and how does kind of what are some of the ideas that maybe you heard in one of my sessions, but that you've been putting it into practice. The reason I'm so curious about this is because I know what it looks like in the high school classroom. I'm interested to hear what you've been doing with sixth graders, seventh graders, eighth graders. Go for it.
Yes, absolutely. I actually, before I talk about what I'm doing now, I actually want to talk about my biggest, an absolute, totally hugest failure with implementing this program. So
yeah, that's great.
There I was the last weekend of January, just absorbing all of this new information and ideas. And I was like, okay, the next day I see my kids, we're going to hit the ground running. We're going to, I bought a Sight Reading Factory subscription that same weekend. And on that next day, I started talking with them about how, okay, every day we're going to have a multi-part sight reading. This is the step-by-step process by which we complete the sight reading. And also here are these multiple times a week at home sight reading assignments that you've never done before. You don't know how to do them because I haven't taught them to you yet, but they're part of your grade now. And so I basically I bit off way more than I could chew, and I gave them way more than they were ready for. So I learned a lot from that experience, as in just and it sounds so simple, but it was my third year teaching, and we all make mistakes, but just learning to not give them more than they're ready for, and learning how to ease them in. It's something that I miserably failed at this past spring, and I started this fall, determined to not repeat that mistake. So I spent a lot of time over the summer thinking about, especially for my sixth grade group, my predominantly sixth grade non-audition choir, how do I ease them into this without it being boom, like a wall of brand new information and brand new ideas? And
now, do you think, sorry to interrupt, do you think it was that you gave them, that the stuff you gave them was simply too difficult for their current literacy level, or is it that you gave them too much stuff? What was exactly that you feel like didn't work?
Yeah, so I had this great idea, Chris. I thought to myself, I'm going to give them a sight reading pre-assessment where I give them not a level one sight reading, but I give them the Colorado All-State or middle school All-State like parameters for the sight reading and just see how they do. And then from there, we'll kind of talk about, okay, like what sight reading level might be right for you based on how you did on this pre-test. Except again, so overeager that I assigned the pretest before that first day of school, where I taught them how to do all these sight reading things. And it sounds so dumb saying it out loud, but I was just so excited to get them on the path to, teaching themselves their music. So it was just total information overload. They had this assignment, but like the description was super minimal. I did not tell them like the step-by-step process of how to like do a sight reading well. I didn't give them the tools that they needed to succeed. And so,
so what you did.
this,
So sorry, I'm going to jump back in again because I want to keep this like right on the literacy aspect of it, because this is so good for you. This is so good for people to hear, because what you did was you essentially handed Catcher in the Rye to a bunch of kindergartners.
Yes.
And I can understand why you would think that, but I use the Catcher in the Rye to kindergartners example to help us understand that, like, if I don't have any frame of reference for where that literacy for how to acquire that literacy, then you actually don't learn much about what the student is capable of doing, unless you figure out where that good starting place is. And I think one of the things that has a lot of kind of pushback that I've gotten over the years from the ideas that I try to sell are based on folks that have made the mistake that you made, which I think that's so incredibly mature to be able to say, and this is how I screwed up. And then it seems like you didn't give up though on the idea that you need to figure out where that starting place is, or else we wouldn't be having this conversation. So what happened from January of last year to the start of this school year that made it so much better?
Yes. So the first thing that I did, because I was really focused on how can I give them the tools to not teach them their music, and thus become the gatekeeper through which all music is learned. But how can I teach them to teach themselves their music? And so the first thing I did was I stopped over programming. So back to January, the music that I'd already programmed for the spring concert, they couldn't teach it to themselves because I wasn't programming with that in mind. I did not give them accessible pieces to where I could teach them these concepts and then they could use them to teach themselves their music. I just, I had already programmed the music. There was nothing that could be done. So I kind of did what I could, but then I still wound up, teaching them their music directly, relying on, things like practice tracks on the piano to some extent, singing their music to them so that they could hear it and then sing it back. Right. And one thing that I really love about the Rip Off the Band-Aid podcast is if you're teaching this method of literacy through solfege and through sight reading, it's got to be the only way they learn music. And I totally agree with that. So the first thing I did was I looked at all my music with the critical eye for what can they read right now. So a lot of their music for this upcoming fall concert is by design very easy music. We're still doing it at a very high level. We're still thinking about the text and we're still, approaching it with great diction, but like the pitches, like there's not a lot of like, minor sevenths, and there's not a lot of, like triplet sixteenths or, whatever.
Right.
I'm thinking about my high school group right now. I scaled back on the repertoire so that once I gave them the tools, they could actually use them. The music is like a step beyond their current sight reading ability. And then the second thing that I did was I did not just teach them how to sight read the once. We started going over the process every single class, but rather than me just like saying the steps out loud or like putting them on screen, I would start class with, okay, write down as many steps of the sight reading. I call it the sight reading formula, like the Krabby Patty formula, because in middle school you just kind of, I don't know, I'm goofy like that. So I just say, it doesn't matter the order, just what are the steps to making sight reading happen? And I have 7, technically 8, but whatever. And so every day for the first 2 weeks of school, when they come in, they write down as many as they can remember. And no surprise, by the time it gets to that second week of school, they already have the sight reading formula memorized without me having to say it, without me having to project it. I can just put up the sight reading for the day and say, go. And because I have not only taught, but rigorously reinforced the concepts, and I make little games out of it. Like I say, like, okay, I need first, like, discuss in groups of 3, try and put your heads together. Which group of 3 can remember the most steps in the right order? Like, make it a little competition. And so the idea is, when we move it from like consciously like, crap, what is the next step? What should I do next? To just like automatically going on in the background, that's when they get to focus on making some music happen, and stop focusing on I guess like the nuts and bolts. And it starts to feel a lot easier as it gets more fluid. They start basically the practice that I have them do at home, where they take 60 seconds. A lot of my students, they don't need all the 60 seconds anymore, because they just run the steps like that.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting because, of course, one of the main messages that I've been trying to get across is that the process that you just described, which is essentially my process as well, our kids at my school know how to do the sight reading process. It's not just about the ability to read the notes like robots. It's about them knowing how to think through the process. But that process, whatever it looks like in your classroom, for me, it's notes go up on the screen. The tonic is played. They sing a scale. They sing an arpeggio. Their job is to figure out what is my starting note. Their job is also to figure out what does my starting note sound like, and they have to do it in their heads. And then it's 1, 2, ready, sing. They sing and hold their first pitch. From that point on, they go through audiating all the way through the exercise. They try to find all the tricky things in their head. And then it's 1, 2, ready, sing again, and they sing through it. And that process is the same way that our literacy colleagues that teach kindergartners to read their first books, they know that they have to go through those processes as well. In literacy instruction, there's this concept called the reading rope, which describes, like you just said, the idea that there's a whole bunch of skills that have to happen in order for someone to successfully read. And at first, you have to talk about each of those skills, and you have to drill them over and over and over until they get to the point where that rope is more tightly woven and becomes a thick, tight string, rather than a frayed rope at the end. I'm explaining this poorly for an audio podcast. I'll probably come up with a visual that I can post on social media. But what you're just describing is exactly the reading rope, which is that eventually all those processes become automatic, and they can start to do many things all at once. And then that's how we know they're starting to really learn. Now, the amazing thing is that hearing you talk about what you're doing with 6th graders, 7th graders, 8th graders, if you're able to stay at that school for years, when those kids get to the high school level, I think you will probably be shocked every day what they can do, because it will be probably way more advanced than anything you learned to do as a young musician. And
Absolutely true.
That happens to me, and I've been doing it for 20 something years, and every single year they're able to do more and more and more, because of that legacy passes down from the kids above them. And, so it's an amazing thing. If your school or church are in the market for staging products like risers, shelves, podiums, movable platforms, all of the things that you need to set your choir up for success, I would like to strongly urge you to check out StageRight. StageRight's products are sturdy, they're durable, they're easy to use. I have personal experience with the acoustical shelves and some of the platforms that they have at StageRight, and I can tell you, compared to some of the more expensive competitors, they are a really great option to fit inside of a tight school budget, but also to give you the durability and usability that you need. So check out StageRight at stageright.com. Now we will check in with Jacob about how the literacy rollout is going in his classroom. How have your processes changed since you got rid of the piano, or mostly got rid of the piano, in terms of teaching the kids how to do the music without the keyboard? What are some of the things that you've brought into the classroom that are new for them?
Sure. So, one thing that we've started doing, and I use the word a lot in my past years of teaching, but I've really think I have a much better understanding of it now and a much better use of the word. But we've started audiating,
Yep.
and truly audiating, not and because when I say audiate, we don't just. I think a lot of us think the right pitch, right? Think the right pitch, so do, and we think like that. But we also need to think of the tone. We need to think of the rhythm. We need to think of the breath before. And so part of my audiation process is I expect solfege syllables on the lips, and I expect to see
Ah.
breaths. And it's not just so we basically do everything but make sound, and that's been really empowering because a lot of times I think a lot of especially middle school teachers will say, "Okay, everyone, here's your starting pitch. Sing do." Okay, now can we make that a pretty do? And then because they're thinking the pitch, but they're not thinking of the actual sound and the tone quality.
That's
And
great.
so we audiate with tone. And that's such a funny thing to think about because I think when we think audiation, we think, okay, well, we're just thinking of the notes and we're hearing the notes. But then I'm also asking them to think about what are the other people singing. Can you look at the other part and see how their notes work with yours? And with some of my advanced groups, I mean, they're 7th, 8th graders, but they can tell me like, oh yeah, they're singing, the tenors are singing in me, the basses are singing a do. That's a third and a third, I kind of know what that sounds like. And oh, we're singing T and they're singing do, which means that we're going to have dissonance. And like, we're using these words and I'm like, my brain just exploded because I finally have taken the ceiling off of my classrooms. I haven't said, we're only going to go as far as this method book or as I'm going to let you go. I'm going to let you ask questions. One of my kids literally asked me, is there a word for when those notes clash? And I said, yes. And we can use dissonance. You can use clash. There's a lot of different words. Let's all decide on dissonance and let's use that, as our terminology in this class. And I
Now, are you
think it just,
doing, sorry to interrupt, are you doing daily sight reading drills of any kind as well?
yeah, definitely sight read
Okay.
every day.
Yep.
If for anyone out there who doesn't, it's so important and it's so hard, and especially around concert time, we want to stop. We want to say, you know what, I just don't have the time, and I need to get onto this repertoire. It's worth it. It's worth it. It's the sight reading process is going to inform the repertoire and the whole music making process. So, it looks different in all of my classes. I will say the first week of school, I don't think I showed anybody a formal piece of music. It was audiation games. It was, maybe you've probably seen this, but you write the solfege letters, so like D, R, M, and then kind of have, point, and they would sing and do things like that. I really wanted to bathe them in the major scale, the minor scale, solfege, especially my 6th graders, who some of them came from an elementary school where that was part of the curriculum and some of them did not. And so I really wanted to bathe them with that, so that when I did start showing them symbols and actual notation and saying, okay, this is do and this is why it's do, there was already an oral connection, so that when they were singing these symbols, they were already audiating and singing, okay, I know what do, re, mi sounds like. This is what it looks like now. I felt that and I'm sure there's books out there that I haven't read that I need to, that explain why that might be a good idea or why that might not. But for me, that process of kind of bathing and just giving them that oral awareness and reference before showing them the symbols has really helped out with my sight reading this year. And then of course we've
You
gone
are
on to daily sight
correct.
reading.
You are correct, by the way. There's lots of books about that, but not very many books in the music context. And this is kind of this is one of the reasons I've been on the crusade that I've been on. And there is a ton of literature about how people need to have that audio library that you're talking about in their head to learn to read English or Spanish or Chinese, but not as much about why we need that in music as well. And of course, I'm always saying that music is just a language like all the other ones. We have to learn it the same way. And that Carol Krieger calls what you described the sight before sound. Oh, sorry, the sound before sight concept is that I've got to hear the sounds in my head. If I look at the symbols and there's no sound in my head from that, then I can't read the music. And so we do have to bathe them in all of the terminology and all the sounds and all the patterns, all the different things that they might come across, so that they can start to look at the symbols and have those noises, literally noises, pop into their head. And the more they are immersed in that, then the quicker they pop into their head, and that's when you get the fluent reader, someone who's able to just pick up a piece of music and sing it at sight without any kind of preparation or studying ahead of time. They just read it like they're reading the newspaper. They can get there, and it's an amazing thing. And of course, you stick with this for 2 or 3 years with middle school kids, 6 to 8. You're going to get to a point where your 8th graders will do things that will shock you every day.
Right.
And I'm so excited for you for that. It's going to be an amazing thing, because that's kind of how it played out in my life. Is I started it with 9th graders. Did it for 3 or 4 years, got to the point where those 9th graders had started. They got to their my advanced choir, their junior year. And we just didn't need the piano at all. You talk about pushing it to the side most of the time. You will get to a point, where your 8th graders will tell you to not touch the piano because it's slowing them down.
Yeah, I have experienced that, and again, as someone who's not a talented pianist or a skilled one at that, they've said, and it was funny because they first said it, and of course, me and my 8th graders, my 7th graders, we have a relationship, we messed around, so they were joking like, Mr. Garcia, you keep playing the wrong notes, so why don't you just stop? But then they said, but we also we want to show you that we can do it, like we want to prove to you and to ourselves that we don't need the piano, so play our starting notes and let us sing. And I was like, and that was like just the pride, right? That's like the passing of the torch, the independence that I think we should all want to see in our musicians, right? It was, to me, it wasn't just a musical win. It was like a personal win as well, because I agree with you. I want the student who comes to my choir room for 1 year to get just as much out as my kids who are going to be the next music teachers. And for them to say, you know what, we want to show and we want to hold ourselves accountable and try without this. We want to get rid of the easy mode, and we want to really put ourselves out there and do this. I just, fills me with joy. How else are they going to apply that in the rest of their lives? What other things are they going to do where they're going to put themselves out there, where they're going to be vulnerable, where they're going to, like you said, do hard things that they didn't think they could do before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's you're on the right track with all this stuff. And so it warms my heart to see my kids do this, but it also warms my heart to see other teachers figuring this stuff out, because I'm happy when other people's kids are happy too, not just mine. It's just such a cool thing. In this clip, I'm checking in with Ian to see if he's noticed changes in his classroom environment, classroom management, and behavior, or otherwise classroom culture, since he's made these changes. Has there been changes in the way the kids approach the class since you've been doing all this stuff?
Absolutely, yes. And the reason is because honestly, I'm not sure if you already have an episode or episodes devoted to this, but something that I am starting to do now as I sort of move into making this methodology my own is really embracing a culture of a fully student-run classroom as much as possible. And what that looks like is the same way that I teach and reteach and reinforce and, sort of quiz on the methodology for sight reading. I'm starting to do that same process with the guiding question of how do we, and by we, I mean you, how do you as a class run your own rehearsal? Because really, now that you can teach yourself your music, you don't need me. I can keep the beat for you if you want me to. But otherwise, it's kind of the same as the sight singing process. Like you audiate it, you sing through it, you reflect, and you make a note of, maybe anything that didn't go quite right, and then you try it again. And so what am I doing in that whole process? I used to be walking around and pointing out students' mistakes for them. And I'm not doing that anymore. Instead, I'm just asking them the question, how did that go? Or what should you do next? So when you ask, what should you do next? Or what should you be doing right now? Or what's your plan? Or what's your goal right now? It sort of encourages them to take ownership and take responsibility for their own learning. They don't look to I'm sorry, I'm recalling a funny moment that happened just the last time I saw my students on just a few days ago. They don't look to me anymore, literally. So what I did was in my advanced middle school choir, 7th and 8th graders, and I think this is key for those listeners out there that teach at the middle school and are wondering, what this process looks like? Well, for me, what I said was, okay, we went through our warm-ups, we went through our sight singing game for the day, which I'll talk about in a second, which is great for middle schoolers. We went through our all of our beginning of class stuff. Okay, now it's time to work on our concert music. So what I said was, okay, pull out this this piece that we are working on, and go ahead and let's sing a run through of it. And one of you, would you pull out your phone? They don't have phones in class unless I give them permission. Would you pull out your phone, record it, and then you're going to sing it through, listen back to the recording, reflect, and try again. And so they do that, and I'm just sitting there at my desk doing absolutely nothing, just watching and listening to them spot their own mistakes, generate ideas to correct them, because I've given them the tools, right? If there's a pitch inaccuracy, okay, let's move up the ladder. If it was a step or a skip or a leap or something like that, right? Or if it was a rhythm error, like let's just rhythmically notate that measure real fast and then try it real slow, and then speed it up. And so they're just completely autonomous. In fact, there was this one pitch issue that they weren't talking about at all throughout the run. And it happened multiple times, because it happened at the chorus every time. And I was this close to jumping in and saying, hey, why don't we take a look at, measure so-and-so, when like the quiet student, who's one of my more advanced kids, but sort of never really came out of her shell last year, just chimes in with, oh, by the way, we've been missing this thing right at the chorus, right? And everyone was like, wait, what? We have? And so it's just, I can't tell you how great it feels to just sit back and watch them just make it happen. And it feels so weird, because like as teachers, we want to be involved, we want to be helping them, we want to be guiding them, but we all know that learning that happens experientially and of the kids' own volition really sticks with them better and creates for that lasting effect that we all want from our singers, which is permanent positive changes towards becoming better musicians.
Absolutely. It's interesting because all of the things you describe and the things that I've been trying to describe on the show for years have implications beyond just actually reading the music, which is kind of what I was hinting at there. I wanted to hear about what your classroom environment has become. And it sounds like what you're describing an environment that's become very collaborative, where kids almost become too busy to screw around and be jerks. And I've also talked a lot about the way that I kind of approach classroom management, the way I grade. And a lot of times I get back, well, how do you have time to keep track of all of their infractions? And I say, well, they're very rare. So they happen so infrequently that if something does happen, it's very easy for me to record that, like make a note of that, have it affect their rehearsal grade or whatever, because for the most part, they're too busy to screw around. Like they've got something to do all the time. I have choir of 100, and they're 100% of them are engaged almost 100% of the time. And it's because they're busy doing stuff. And so I just think that this has implications for classroom management. It also has implications for the mental health of our teachers that are trying to do this job, is because they're describing what you're describing, which is just, I get to sit back and watch them do amazing things. And then I leave the classroom feeling like, wow, I'm giving them a real gift here. So what is this great game you came up with?
Fantastic. I did not come up with anything that I do in my classroom, and I'll proudly admit that I steal from literally everyone.
Okay. Yes, we all do.
One of the great resources I would recommend to every single middle school teacher trying to follow your method is S-Cube Sight Singing Success by Dale Duncan. It is a full curriculum that teaches sight reading in a very accessible for young singers, very step-by-step methodological approach, and it's very fun at all times. And so his big game that we play every single day in class, in fact, I play it in all of my classes, 6 through 12, and I'm tracking them throughout the semester. We're going to see which group wins against me the most, but it's poison pattern, also known as forbidden pattern.
Pattern, yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
And you may be familiar, but My favorite part of it is there's this tip that Dale shares in the first time that you run the game, which is to tell students up front that you are going to try and distract them. And you can distract them with personal stories. You can distract them with just random wacky anecdotes, like making conversation with the random student, like, oh, how's your day going today? And then like try and do the forbidden pattern in hopes of messing them up. But my personal favorite way to distract them, and again, you tell them ahead of time, is I give them just a miniature theory lesson. And I talk about things like whole steps and half steps, or quarter notes and eighth notes. Let's sing this forbidden pattern, and this is going to be only quarter notes. Can you hear the difference, right? And so they think that I'm trying to distract them so I can win the game. I pretend to be super competitive. Like all I care about is winning poison pattern. But they are so busy focusing on not getting distracted from the poison pattern that they don't realize that they're actually learning a lot more than they would if I just like sat them down and lectured them on a given concept for however many minutes. And it's such a great way to inspire, like, because it's them versus me, it immediately fosters a sense of community between them. And it's just so much fun, and it makes learning solfege, learning hand signs very fun. And then I say, hey, we're going to do that same thing, except now, instead of Mr. Henning giving you your solfege, it's up on screen. Let's learn how to read it.
Yep, that's great. That's fantastic. I play the game as well. Even with high school kids, they love it. And it's it's essentially what master teachers do, is they trick kids into learning. In the next portion of the episode, we're going to move back to Jacob, who really wants to share the value that he's discovered in small group singing tests, which are a new feature of his classroom that is having incredible effect. Okay, so how did you mentioned already that you came across some of the ideas that I've been evangelizing, so to speak, at a professional development that I gave down in Waco. Now, what I'm curious about, and specifically, is what were some of the things that you heard right away that you thought, hey, I could try this in my classroom? Give us some specifics of things that you've pulled out of that presentation and some of the podcasts that you are now using.
For sure. Well, the first one was push the piano to the other side of the room, right?
Yeah.
I can play out some parts and pick out some parts, but I find that most times I'm doing more harm than good. And so we talked about just taking the piano out of the equation, playing starting pitches or acquiring them, through a pitch pipe or something, and going from there. And I was very apprehensive at first, right? I'm still a very newish teacher. I'm only in my 4th year of teaching. And then again, to go to the middle school level, I think a lot of us get in our heads about what they're going to be capable of, and we want to hold their hands, and we want to, and that's kind of the metaphor. When I introduced this to my kids, especially my kids I've had for a while, I said, hey, I've been holding y'all's hand while we cross the road. I've been playing this piano for you. We're going to change things up. We're going to try something new. I believe in you. We're going to just not play the piano. I'm going to play your notes, and we're going to use that, and we're going to go from there. So that's a big thing that I've been trying to incorporate now, to various levels. I will use the piano and we'll pluck out parts here and there, but just not depending on it on the day-to-day rehearsal as much has been just really changing for my choirs. They're listening to each other a lot more. They're listening to themselves, and they're getting a lot more secure in their parts. They don't need that harmonic blanket of the piano to find their pitches. They're starting to internalize it, hear it, audiate the pitches a lot more accurately. And it's shown improvements, not just with the repertoire that we've been producing. I mean, I think our fall concert, I've heard from multiple people who have kind of seen my fall concerts progress since I started there. One of our best fall concerts, but just in their sight reading process as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. I have here a screenshot. Don't worry, you're not on the spot or anything. But I have a screenshot from a post you made in the Choralosopher's Facebook page about the PD that I gave. But then you said that you also have implemented singing tests into your program, and you said, I've implemented them in my middle school program, and they have been going so well. My kids love getting the chance to show their knowledge and skills to one another, and all of the awkwardness of singing in small groups has been quickly replaced with encouragement, accountability, and pride. Tell us more about that, because we talked about the sight reading thing, which we'll get back to. But talk to me about how the small group accountability has changed your classroom culture in the short term.
Right. So we talked about there's a lot of different ways to do singing tests. And so I kind of adopted a method that you talked about, which was having them go in, sextets or octets, and whatnot, going in small groups and singing. And I'll have the music stand set up in front of them, and they're allowed to bring their music if they feel they need it. A lot of them don't like using their music. I've noticed they like to show off. They like to show,
Mm-hmm.
hey, look, I know this. I don't need my music. And of course, I always give them a heads up. I don't spring it on them. I let them know early in the week, hey, we're going to be doing a singing test, on this day, and it's going to be over measures, 18 to 36. And the expectation is that you are, and then I have changed expectations at times. Sometimes it will be that you're memorized. Sometimes it will be a 2-part section or a unison section. Again, depending on the level of my ensemble, I'll differentiate it to work with. So for my beginners, it might be a unison part. I'll have just the altos test together, just the sopranos test together. Where my varsity groups, they know that okay, it's you and a partner on your part, and then in the soprano twos and then 2 soprano ones, and they know that they're expected to be able to hold their part in harmony. But my students, they absolutely love them. They start asking me, when are we having our next singing test? But I think part of that is, again, the way that I presented them, and we kind of had a conversation before we started that this is a time to encourage each other, to build each other up, and that some people might, in your opinion, know the part better than others, but we're still going to encourage people for going up there, for putting themselves out there, and for giving it their all. And so there's we clap for each other after every group that goes. We make sure we clap it up, and we encourage them. I hear a lot of really positive remarks coming back. My girls, especially, like, "Oh, you killed that, you ate that." I don't know what they're talking about, but
Slay,
it seems
queen.
positive for them. Exactly, I love it. I love the positivity, especially my guys. Man, it's like a football arena when they're like, "Let's go, man, let's go, you got this." Like, I just love seeing them build each other up. I mean, it's one thing to have your teacher, someone who's older than you that you respect, say, "Hey, I'm proud of you, did a good job." But I just noticed that there's something that happens to the young person's esteem when their peers build them up and say, "Hey, you sounded really good," or "I'm really proud of you, you did a really good job." That's just something that I can never provide because I'm not at that same level as them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really awesome. And that very much echoes how the environment is in my classroom as well, because of that, hey, we're all in this together kind of thing. And the other thing I've noticed from singing tests that have been really beneficial is that the shy, quiet kid finally realizes that he or she is also able to do it. And when they only sing in the big group, the shy, quiet kid, and we all know that every choir teacher knows that they have those, that like that's an archetype, so to speak, in a choir classroom, is that if they only ever sing in the large group, then without even realizing it, they start to internalize over this course of the school year that, well, this loud kid next to me, he's the one doing all the work. And maybe nobody verbalizes that to them, but they start to have less pride in the work of the group overall, because they don't really believe deep down that they're capable of making the sound that everyone else is making. And those singing tests take away that safety blanket. So it's scary at first, but then after they go through it, then they're like, oh, wow, you know what? I didn't need him. I actually could do it myself. And that's where we start to get the real buy-in that you're describing, where kids are like everybody's got something to bring, and those singing tests kind of put that on display for everybody else. Are you seeing anything like that too?
Yeah. I, as a teacher, have gotten to know my students' voices a lot better and on a lot more individual basis.
Yep.
Having them sing for me in that way. I had this one, and I mean, it's so funny because you just described the situation: shy, smaller voice, and then she sang, but with such accuracy. It was a pretty complex singing test for that group, and she just sang it perfectly. It wasn't the loudest, but it was supported. It was beautiful, and it was correct, and everyone's eyes just got huge, and they were like, "We didn't know you could sing." And then they built her up, and then that encouraged her to then now sing out.
Yep.
I also find that it, like you said, we have a lot of students who are. It's nice to let our students, I like to say, flex in different ways, right? And so, whether the singing test is repertoire or sight reading based, you're going to have those students with those naturally talented, we might say, big voices, or an affinity towards these things, but they might struggle with some of these singing tests, or with memorization, or with sight reading. And it gives an opportunity for the students who do have those skills, who don't get the recognition because they're not necessarily necessarily the outgoing singer or the one auditioning for solos to kind of get that pat on the back, that attaboy, showing off their skills in a different way. So I definitely think it builds a lot of esteem. It gets me a chance as a director to hear their voices more individually, to see how I can best differentiate my instruction across my choirs to make sure that I'm benefiting everybody on their vocal journey, as well as the ensemble. It's just made my ensemble stronger. We've kind of agreed that when we, work out our voices, I'm a big gym guy, so I talk about gym and I make a lot of comparisons, but, and football and basketball, my kids, a lot of them are involved in sports. We've recognized that when you as an individual train and get stronger, that it makes the team stronger, right? And so that kind of sense has gotten my group really excited about keeping themselves accountable and getting themselves stronger while still encouraging the rest of their team and still being part of the team. I think I was afraid of that. I was afraid that some of them might take it, well, I know my part, why don't you know your part? But I just really haven't gotten that, and I just think that's a big part of that's because I'm not like that as a person, and I would squash that right away if I felt that that's the way our swinging tests were going.
Right.
But we've all gone in with encouragement, with positivity, with a lot of love, and that fear just hasn't even formulated or hasn't even manifested.
Yeah. It's interesting because over the years I've advocated quite a bit and publicly to large groups of people that we need to include individual and small group, which is, by the way, one of the national standards for music education, by the way, is to have kids. It's standard number one. And so it's weird that it's been controversial for me to say that kids need to sing alone and in small groups as part of our class. And I've had people accuse me of something tantamount to abuse because I require kids to sing alone and in small groups. And in my experience, it is the opposite of that.
Yes.
It is the opposite of that. It makes kids feel so powerful, especially the ones who were the most scared, because they learn that they can do hard things. And if I have to kind of drag them over the finish line, so to speak, the first time, so that they can learn that, it's without exception something that goes by as they take my class for 3 or 4 years, that they look back on their first singing test and how scared they were the very first time, and they look back on it and think, "Wow, I can't believe I was ever afraid to do that."
Yeah.
Like it's really that was all in my head, and of course, that's valuable for them, not just for their choir education. That's valuable for them for their life as a life lesson, that I can do the hard thing that I'm afraid to do. And I know what that feels like, because in choir, I overcame that. And I learned that I wasn't going to die from the anxiety that I was feeling, and I could push through it. It doesn't mean that stage fright goes away. It just means that you just learn tools to deal with that. And if I tell my kids, if you learn nothing else in this class, I want you to learn that. Even if you're the kid who takes this class 1 year and never takes it again, I want you to learn that you could do hard things, and that's a valuable thing. So I'm curious, especially in your case, because you've just started some of these things. Are your kids say it sounds like you've done a great job of selling the singing test as a concept to them, because they're already into it. Were there any kids who really kind of said, "No, I don't want to do this," or "I'm not going to do this"?
Not surprisingly, not really. And in fact, almost the opposite happened. I had a girl in my JV choir last year, a 7th grader, who would not sing at all. Would just would not sing, would just sit there. Please stand. Would not stand. Please sing. Would not do this. I'd take her into my office and we try to, voice test and stuff, and it wouldn't happen. And then when she was in my choir again, I was surprised. I don't think she signed up for it. I think she just got put there. And I approached her early on and said, "Hey, I just want you to know, I'm really glad you're here. I'm glad to see you again. You're always welcome here. But there is an expectation that we're going to sing, and there's going to be this new thing that I'm going to do where we're going to sing in small groups." And I don't know what really fixed with her, but I let her choose her group the first time. I said, "Hey, I want you to just tell me," and it was kind of a secret. It was, I approached her before class started. I said, "Hey, tell me who you're comfortable singing with. Tell me the people in this room that you would want to go and do this with. And I'll, I'm doing air quotes right now, I'll just randomly assign them to you." And so she gave me a few names. I said, "Okay, cool. I'll make sure some of those people are in your group." Okay. Sure enough, it comes up, goes there, and she sings again so soft, so just so soft this first time. But we made the biggest deal. Some of those girls were like, "We've never heard you sing. It's such a pretty voice, blah blah blah." And that second test, oh my gosh, she blew them out of the water. She's one of my strongest JV singers now. And of course, I'm like here, like, oh my gosh, where was this whole time? But I'm just so glad we got there. And you're right.
Yeah.
I kind of had that conversation with some people where they were like, "Well, why are you making her sing? Like, she clearly doesn't want to be there. She doesn't want to do this." And I explained to them, well, she's there. She's in my class. When you're enrolled in a class, part of it is to participate in the class and learn the curriculum. But also, this is something that I think is going to be good for her. I think, she might have been in an environment where it was, okay, you don't want to do it. That's okay. And there's a a line to walk, and there is things like that. But I think rather than, I'm trying to think of the word, insisting with a heavy hand that she do it, I just kept encouraging with that same sort of intensity, just an insane amount of, I know that there's a voice in there. I know that you have something to say. You're a very artistic young person. I know that you can make something beautiful. Just let's put it out there. Let's figure out what we need to do to get you to that point. And now she has no problem singing by herself, singing in a group. And like you said, so if anyone wants to go the route of this is more harm than good, I mean, I can show you the evidence that it's the exact opposite, that it has done wonders for this young woman's self-esteem, for her confidence, and really just her place in the group. Because I think a lot of the other students kind of not necessarily ostracized her, but stuck away from her because they felt like she wasn't contributing, right? Like any team player, you're out there hustling and working your butt off, and then this other person's, walking onto the court, and you're like, come on, dude, like coach is going to make us run laps because of you. But when she finally started to contribute to, even at that small level, just their attitudes shifted, and she was just immediately part of the group now. And just, the social, the musical dynamic has completely shifted around this student. And I think a big part of it was she was able to, like I said, I figured out a way that we could highlight her in a small group, and then she just got more and more comfortable. And again, she's one of mine who says, "Hey, when can we have another singing test?" Because now she wants to show, oh, I can do this better than other people can. She kind of has that confidence now. So, I think there was people who were, like, you could see their eyes really open, and just like, oh my gosh, we have to sing in these small groups. We have to sing by ourselves. But I just treated it like it was a very normal part of the curriculum. I didn't make it a big deal. I didn't make it seem like, oh, this is something that we're going to try. I just said, this is what we're doing. This is the expectation. And they understood that. And, I did have some students that, didn't sing the first time. And, those students I kind of identified and marked and graded accordingly. And then I came back to them and, I had them a little conference with them afterwards. I said, hey, so-and-so, I noticed during our singing test, you didn't sing your part. That's now your baseline. So next time that you do a singing test, you got to make some noise. I told them, I don't even care if it's the right noise, but I need you to sing. I need you to sing something, even if it's just the same note over and over again. Because, and we talked about this, grading on progress, grading on growth. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, they went and they got, maybe 50% of the notes right, but I gave them 100 because I told them, to go from no sound to singing at a point that I could hear you and actually being kind of right with some of these songs, with some of these notes, shows an immense amount of growth for where you're at. And so where do we go from there? And then now it's just, again, part of the routine, and they're at the level that I think everyone else is at. It's just kind of breaking that seal and treating it like a very normal thing. I think your students will follow suit with you.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that sounds like you're thinking through this stuff really well. I don't know if I brought this up at the PD in Waco or not, but one of the things that I do with the singing tests also, you might already have a system like this, but I tell the kids that they are always allowed to retake the test. They would have to do it outside of class. They'd have to come in and see me before school, after school, during our, we have a school-wide study time. That's about 30 minutes during the middle of the day. They can come in during that time. The catch is they would have to do it by themselves. But the way I sell it to them is that sometimes there are legitimate reasons why a kid on this format, in the small group format, who does really truly know their part, would come up in front of the group and make almost no noise. And of course the kids all go, yeah, because they're really nervous. And I say, yeah, that's legitimate. Sometimes kids really do know their part, but they're really nervous. And so just not a lot of sound comes out because they're taking that breath and they feel that anxiety, and then just nothing comes out. And I get that. So what you're allowed to do is, without anybody watching, we're going to do the test. You can't do the other thing instead of, but if you take the test and it doesn't go well, then you can sign up and come in anytime you want and do it again and prove to me that you do know your part, and you'll get a better grade when you do that. And
Right.
and so in almost every case, I also am able to get those kids who take that opportunity to realize, oh, yeah, I just needed to. I can sing this. I really
Right.
can sing this, but it's just without anybody there to like to judge them or whatever. And then every time they've done that retake, it always results in a way better test the next time they do it. It's that growth idea. They just needed to be shown that they could do it, and then once they have gotten that Band-Aid ripped off, so to speak, then it's great. So here's how I'd like to wrap this up. I've got some as I kind of present a lot of this information over the years, whether it be in person at PDs or at conferences or on the podcast. I get a lot of the same types of responses. One of them specific to middle schoolers, which is that they will hear me talk about what I do at the high school level, and they will say, yeah, I'm sure that's fine for your high school kids that are more advanced, but middle schoolers are not ready to read music a cappella. They need that piano, they need that support because they're having trouble matching pitch, and they need that extra help from the piano. They're not ready for that. Or I'll get one that's say, sure, that these ideas are fine for your advanced privileged students, but my kids aren't ready for these things. I want to get them to a place where they're more advanced, and then I might try some of these kind of things. How would you respond to that if you heard that?
Well, my first response would be, I have students of all kinds of privileges and unprivileges, and I'll tell you, especially those students who don't have those privileges, when I've given them this technique of singing a cappella and really owning their music, they have gone so far above and beyond, because those are the kids who know how to work. Those are the kids who know how to fight and dig deep and work for what they need, because they've been doing it their whole lives. They've seen their mom and dad do it. So that's something that makes me proud, to give those kids an opportunity to really be good at something that, the rest of the world might have just told them, like, no, like you can't do this. But I think the first thing I would say is it's okay for your choirs not to sound amazing every day. Because there's times where we sight read and we sing a cappella, and it's not the most beautiful sound. It's not even the most beautiful sound I've heard. It's not even the most beautiful sound that I know they can make.
Right.
But in that struggle, it's part of the journey, right? It's you got to look ahead, and that those first few times you sing a cappella, yeah, people aren't going to match pitch. But how do you know you're not matching pitch unless you're listening for it, right? And then of course there's also some physical things, right? And I think what we should talk about also is the whole pitch matching thing, about the physical, teaching kids how to physically acquire and reach those sounds. But they need to be able to hear that. And if you're just always plucking the note and really reinforcing the correct pitch, you can have these students that are off pitch that they never realize it, because everyone else around them is singing the right pitch. The piano's singing the right pitch. I must be all right. They're getting drowned out by the noise, right? And some of those rehearsals are going to be uncomfortable. They're going to be a little quiet. They're going to be, a little softer singing. And you're going to feel like you're really trying to push and pull teeth and get them to go. But if you're willing to invest in them, I would use that word, invest in some of the struggles, some of the headaches that you're going to have as a teacher. Because, don't get me wrong, I want to get in there, get on the piano, get them singing the notes, and then, woo, look at us, we can do all this cool stuff. But if you're willing to invest in their education, I think that's so much more meaningful, and you're going to achieve those things at a lot quicker. I think you'll be surprised, really, what these kids can handle. They're very, very smart, and like you said, at younger ages, they're able to absorb a lot more quickly. And I think sometimes we just underestimate them. I had a conversation with another teacher friend of mine. She taught theater, but it was, how do we differentiate without lowering standards, right? We don't want to lower the standards, but we want to differentiate. And I think, like what you said, a perfect example was for your singing tests, you give them the opportunity to do it by themselves without the pressure of that. It's the exact same test. The exact same standard, sing your part, but you remove the audience aspect, and then they're able to thrive. That's true differentiation, not, well, you can't sing in tune, so I'm going to just, but change the music or change my expectations for, my expectations are that you sing in tune, but I'm going to be realistic about that and try to find your needs. And, what do you need physiologically? What do you need that? And yeah, it's going to be awkward singing, a cappella and not having that piano. And you're going to want to be tempted to pull it out and just, let me just play the part, guys. But, stick with it. And I think your students will have such a greater ownership of the music, and you'll feel so much more part of the, I think they also feel more part of the music making process. I would find sometimes when I would do the piano, you know, and just, okay, let me play your parts, alto, sopranos, my groups would just kind of glaze over. And I was like, I was just doing music at them, you know,
Yep.
where we took the piano away and we sung a cappella, and suddenly now we're all making the music, not just me anymore. And I just, the connection that I feel with my ensembles and my singers now, moving towards a cappella singing. And again, I'll say this, you don't have to do it all the time. You don't have to do it all the time. There's times where, you know, I want to use them. There's times where, you know, the piano can be good, or I play guitar and we did a contemporary, you know, piece, an Alicia Keys song, and the guitar, it added a feeling to the song that was really, really great. So I'm not saying that everything needs to be a cappella, everything needs to be, you know, 16th century polyphony, whatever. But sing a cappella and sing those songs a cappella. It'll really strengthen them as individuals, and it'll strengthen your ensembles.
That's awesome. That is so good. Well, Jacob, I appreciate your time. This has been awesome. And I think it's going to be really helpful for people to hear this perspective. Hopefully we can get more people on board with these ideas. I appreciate you sharing.
I'll be sharing the good news with all the people in my circles.
Awesome. Sounds good. And finally, we have Ian's response to those same prompts.
Yeah, absolutely. There's always this trade-off in our profession of the long-term want of, you know, what do you want your singers, all of them, to be able to do, and what do you want them to know by the time they leave your classroom? And trying to balance that against the short term, the concert's in however many weeks, we got to get ready for this concert. It can't be a bad concert. And so the first thing that I would say to folks who think that beginners of any level, or, you know, middle schoolers or elementary schoolers aren't ready, is, first of all, why are you programming music? And I'm making assumptions here, of course, but why are you programming music that you have to teach them, that is so difficult and so inaccessible to them that they must learn it through you, whether it's you playing on the piano, whether it's you singing along, whether it's, hey, I put these, you know, practice tracks on Google Drive, make sure to listen to them at home, otherwise you won't be ready for this concert. I really, really, really love doing simple music very well. And what's magical is it starts out simple, right? So this coming concert, this fall concert, it's very basic music. I predict by the time 2, 3, 4 more years have passed, they will be able to sight read that super hard music that we all want to program, right? And they will just, I've had multiple experiences already this year where my students taught themselves an entire piece of music in one 90-minute class period, sometimes 30 minutes. I timed it. And what would it be like if you could do some simple things now, just some routines, just some games, just some, let's sight read for 5 minutes every day. And what would it look like if your students were gradually able to sight read and teach themselves harder and harder music just through these progressive skills?
Yeah. That's exactly it.
It's
an investment. It's an investment in the future.
It absolutely
what it is. Yep.
The other thing that I would say is that kids love independence. They love not needing me. They love mastering this skill and then applying it and then performing it and knowing that along no point of that journey was Mr. Henning the person who made it possible. In the sense that I gave them the tools that they need to teach themselves their music. Sure, I'm the gatekeeper. I don't know how I would get them to teach themselves the skills that they need to teach themselves, but I'm getting too far into the weeds here. But
you're right.
They love learning a piece of music, start to finish, using their pencil, their sheet music, their sight reading skills, their solfege, because it's so, I don't know how to describe it, like the autonomy that they get that they just don't get in other classrooms, and they don't get at home. They get in my classroom. They get to say, Mom, Dad, you know, guardian, I taught myself a piece of music today. And that is such a great feeling that, yeah, I don't have any behavior issues. Everybody loves coming to my class. They love wondering what's around the corner. They love, ooh, what section of our music do we get to teach ourselves today? And they love the feeling that they get when they don't need me in order to be successful.
Yeah, that's awesome. Ian, you're killing it. I appreciate you sharing your story here. I think this is going to be helpful information for people, and I appreciate you joining me.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Thank you, as always, for sticking around to the end. I hope you enjoyed that format. That was kind of fun for me to edit and find the common threads in the two gentlemen's conversations and put them together for you in a package, which I hope will be helpful, even if you don't teach middle school, because I think all of us in the music education pipeline need to be thinking about our jobs in the way that we just talked about, is how Ian just finished it. What do we want our kids to be able to do? How confidently do we want them to be able to do it? In which case, are we structuring our courses based on that? So that's, I think, helpful context, and also hopefully some inspirational stories for you trying to incorporate some of these concepts into your classroom. On the way out, don't forget to like, share, leave comments. Use the Choralosophy checkout code at sightreadingfactory.com, endeavormusicpublishing.com, graphitepublishing.com, also at sightreadingfactory.com, and of course join the Patreon. Patreon.com/Choralosophy is waiting for you as a behind-the-scenes support mechanism for this show, and $3 a month gets you in the door there. And we have lots of extra goodies as well as extra conversation happening over there, so join me. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.